Hi, I'm Dave Fornell, the editor of Imaging Technology News Magazine, and this is Greg Freiherr, one of our contributing editors, and we are at RSNA 2013, where things are just starting to wind down, and we wanted to go through some of our choices of the most innovative new technology that we've seen on the show floor and some of the trends that we've observed.
All right, you're absolutely right. We've seen a lot of things, CT, MR across the board, but I'd say CT probably more so than anything else, don't you think, Dave?
Yeah, several of the main manufacturers had come out with new systems at the show.
Yeah, and I saw one interesting one over at Philips. I think you dropped in, saw the Icon?
Mm-hmm. Spectral CT's been out with a couple vendors out there, most notably Siemens, but Philips is taking a little different bend on their technology, where they're really pushing the spectral side of things. Similar to a light that is shining through a prism, where you have the chemical makeup that's made up with the colors that comes out the other side. You could do something similar using photons in X-ray systems, where the CT system, with this new detector that they have, can figure out the atomic number of the elements off the periodic table. So you can pull out specific chemical elements such as iodine using contrast agents, and also calcium that you may find in vessels.
And you see that what they're looking at in that is really that spectrum of data that's available from a wide spectrum of X-rays that they have. Now you take a look at Siemens has come out with Somatome Force. There they have two generators, and they're coming out with monochromatic X-ray beams from each of these different generators. So there's the dual energy approach to it rather than the spectral approach. But similar in that what they're trying to do is to find out at which energies will provide different information on parts of the body. You can tune it for iodinated contrast, like you had mentioned, or maybe even for calcium in the renal stones.
One of the images that Philips showed using their new system is it's difficult sometimes to differentiate between contrast that's flowing through kidney vessels that are spot facing into the image viewing plane, or whether they're stones. And using this algorithm, you could clearly identify stones from iodine in the blood vessels.
Right. Now we also saw something over at GE, again in CT, high-end premium development by GE called the Revolution. So important, so big that it doesn't even fit into either of their classes. Their Optima, which is their mid-tier, and their Discovery, which has always been their high tier, their premium performance. It doesn't fit in either one. They're calling it the Revolution, and really what it comes down to is they're looking at trying to develop something that is going to be the top of their food chain, able to do a wide organ coverage, entire organ coverage, heart, brain, in one rotation, as well as low dose. They've taken their technology for reducing the noise in images. They've had two. One is iterative reconstruction. The other one is modeling, and they've combined the two into what they call it's an Acer V, which is the V standing for the veil. So it's this blend so that they're able to get the best of both worlds.
That system is a 256 slice system. It has an 80 centimeter bore, which I think is the largest on the market now. Yeah. It has a very fast gantry, and it can do a rotation in 0.28 seconds. Yeah. And they're working towards 0.2 seconds.
Yeah. Yep. Fast rotation, great coverage, low dose.
78 centimeter of coverage.
Yeah, it'll basically do most of the body in about a second. No longer do you have to worry about breath hold.
They said they could do a cardiac scan in under a second with under 1 millisievert.
Okay. Moving on to MR, what we looked there, and I've mentioned this before, if you take a look at Silent Scan, they had it last year. They had it again this year, but they've expanded its capabilities. Last year I thought that this was a game-changing technology. Sure enough, we had Siemens jumping on board with their quiet suite, so that too was an effort to get the noise down. And in MR, if you take a look at Siemens, they also had their Freeze-It, which was a body system, or body imaging. But really, other than that, did you see anything else in specialty applications, maybe in MR?
There were 3 vendors on the show floor that were offering neonate MRI systems. GE in particular was showing a work-in-progress system where it can fit within a 10 by 10 space. And the idea is that they could sell it to neonate units in a hospital, so instead of having to take the patient in an incubator with IV pulls with several staff members down to the radiology department and spend about 2 hours setting it up so they could image a neonate, they could just do all the neonatal imaging in the neonate ICU.
Okay, did GE have one of those?
They did.
How about GE's other MR oriented?
They came out with a PET MR system that is integrated, similar to what Siemens introduced a couple of years ago.
Yeah, and interesting too, last year and the year before, they did not have either of these. They did not have either a PET MR or the separate kind of approach to it that Philips had. Philips has a PET MR which essentially is a linear approach. You have the CT and the MR that are connected. The PET and the MR connected. And GE said, just get your PET CT and get your MR, and we'll fuse it together with our software. Sure. This year they are talking now, even though they don't have a name for it yet and they haven't put it through the FDA, but they did show pictures of the body coil integrated with the electronics for the PET detector.
And they're hoping to submit that for FDA review in the beginning of 2014.
Right. So, and if you take a look at how things have been evolving on the molecular imaging side, certainly this is not a molecular imaging conference. We saw all this at RSNA back in June, but Siemens had a new PET CT, MCT flow, and they brought up their SPEC CT, which is a step above what SPEC CT has been before. So we've seen some advantages there. You see anything at Philips this year around molecular imaging, which we hadn't seen at RSNA? I think they had something that I thought was kind of interesting, was that detector. They built it around a flat detector.
The SPEC CT system that they introduced, they used, I believe, new software, new detector technology. They did quite a bit of redevelopment, but they also, the clarity on the image has come up. So instead of being unclear, it's nuclear.
Well, and what's interesting about the SPEC CT, it's called the Intivos, or the Symbia Intivo. The idea behind that is that they take the data sets and they actually digitally fuse them. In the past, when we've looked at SPEC CT, your physicians are going to read the SPEC separate from the CT, because when you combine the two, it's great for localization of any kind of lesion. But you're really not, what you're really not seeing is a fused image that has a lot of diagnostic value, because the SPEC had always been acquired at such a low resolution that you had to actually make the CT of lesser, you had to dumb it down, you had to make it a lower resolution. So what they've done here is they've taken the CT and they've used it to wise up the SPEC part of it, so that if they can see that, let's say if you're looking at bone and you can see that hard tissue, the elements that are within the hard tissue, you know that lesion that you're seeing in SPEC, that corresponds to the same voxels that are in the CT, then you know that that's in the bone.
And they're trying to sell this as a new imaging modality called EPSPECT, where it actually will integrate everything and weave the imaging data together. But some of the images that Siemens were showing from this new system, it had image quality almost to that of CT.
Pretty good, yeah, pretty good stuff. Not bad for SPECT at all. So we take a look at the PET CT side of things, and I was taken a little bit surprised, because usually you see things coming out at S&M that are brand new. Usually you don't see a lot of molecular imaging here at this show for the first time. There was this flat detector, the actual solid-state detectors that were built in place of photomultiplier tubes. If you look at photomultiplier tubes, how long ago was it since we had a vacuum tube TV, okay? All right, and yet here it is, photomultiplier tubes are the workhorse of the PET industry. Now what Philips is saying is no longer. They're going to have a flat detector that's going to be doing this solid state.
Philips introduced the Viros PET CT system, which is the first to introduce digital detection. They get rid of the photomultipliers. Yeah, they do a flat panel detection system in the back, and they're able to improve the image quality quite a bit through software algorithms and also the direct digital transfer.
Yeah, and if we look forward, we take a look at all kinds of things that we've seen, the innovations that have come through. In ultrasound, I saw something kind of interesting, and this is, now that goes more along the line of something that you were seeing, that you had seen at Toshiba, which was that they actually called it innovative technology.
Yes, they didn't quite have a name for it, but with their ultrasound systems, they're able to take a look at the microvasculature, and instead of using traditional Doppler, they're able to enhance that quite a bit to where they're able to pull up very, very tiny vessels in, say, angiogenesis within a cancer tumor, and they're able to take a look at the Doppler flow. And instead of, sometimes the Doppler flow doesn't always appear in the lumen where it should because of the way the ultrasound works, but their technology is able to slow it down to where it looks more realistic.
And I thought that was interesting. If you take a look at therapy, what are the opportunities? If you're taking an oncology patient, you're treating this patient for a specific tumor, trying to get that tumor to shut down, what goes first is the microvasculature. So there's the possibility of maybe being able to see early signs of effect from that therapy. You know, and you can predict many of the things that we come to the show for. One thing that I was surprised about was Sonosite. This is now a part of Fujifilm, and they've been known for the last 14 years, since they were spun off from Philips, as a maker of hand-carried ultrasound, and yet they came out with a cart-based system here at the show. They said that was something that their installed base was asking for, something to be used in the hospital. It's called Export, and it has the advantage of having a large screen and also a touch screen, so that you can use that as kind of a training device for people, as well as maybe in your clinic or in your hospital have a bigger screen that you can use as opposed to the small one that goes with the hand-carried.
And that probably touches upon a trend within imaging overall, with especially in ultrasound, where ultrasound is really being used point of care, but not just point of care, but all specialties across the board.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Now you saw something in wireless, or a lot of wireless in X-ray, didn't you?
Yeah, DR, wireless is king.
Yeah,
A couple of years ago, introduced it at RSNA for the first time, and now it seems to be standard fare for all vendors.
It's everywhere, and of course now you're starting to see some software that's a little bit that takes that X-ray and does a little bit more with it.
River Rain a couple of years ago introduced at RSNA bone suppression software for chest X-rays to better visualize the lungs and the soft tissue. Several other vendors have followed suit, and I think there's probably 5 or 6 booths that we walked into this time around to see simimer technology.
Sure, and you can see it in the ITs and the DR companies that really focus on this. That is their bread and butter. So at Carestream, for example, I saw bone subtraction, which is right along what you're talking about here, where you see 2 images side by side, one with and one without the clavicles and the ribs. And the reason that they're put side by side, why not? Because if you're doing a diagnostic and you say, I think I see something, and can you see it better without the bones there? Can you see it? Maybe you can't even see it. Maybe it's been subtracted out. Well, then you've got the original to refer to. So mammography, there's another area that we could probably take a look at. You were over at GE.
Yes, GE showed its Seneclair, which is a tomosynthesis system, which is still pending FDA PMA. That system will take a 3D data set to take a look at the breast, and it'll form a surrogate 2D image to do your diagnostics off of. But also you could go through slice by slice to take a look at the various layers within the breast. In case you have 2 areas of dense breast tissue, now you could separate that out to see whether it's actually a tumor or whether it's actually a metastasis.
Right. And, and I looked at that and I think, well, Hologic's had this market in North America all to itself for the last 3 years. And GE has been working with Massachusetts General Hospital going back almost a couple of decades in breast tomo. And you could have, if you were going to lay odds, more than likely you thought GE would be out the gate the first, but no, Hologic beat them handily. So now you have to take a look at what GE is going to do to one-up Hologic, and I think you're going to see a real battle now. But it's going to take a little while because they only filed their PMA just a few weeks ago. So that's something that's going to take a little bit longer clearance, or actually approval process, than the clearance process at the FDA.
They also showed the Cenobright system, which is a contrast-enhanced spectral mammography system. It actually takes 2 different energy X-rays and will subtract it out to where it'll show or enhance areas where there's metastasis. So it also helps with dense breasts. They showed some very compelling images today where you look at it, it's like, well, this looks like dense breast tissue, but once it's enhanced, you can see very minor differences. You can see very minor differences within the breast tissue to make that diagnosis.
Yeah, and it all comes down to, too, is something else that we were talking about prior to this, but is information technology. If you're looking at IT and PACS, we're working into a world where enterprise-wide IT is going to be the driving force for everything, and PACS now is becoming integrated more and more, and we're seeing a lot of IT things that maybe we wouldn't have seen just a few years ago. There's an acceptance on the part of PACS vendors that's the way they're going to have to go. So there's so much out there now, and it's really, they're looking for ways to easily transfer images, transfer information, and make radiology more of a team player. So we see a lot of web-based, we've seen a lot of PACS and ology type technologies that are made more compatible with these general systems. So, and we're going to see a lot more in the future.
That trend goes along with the use of VNAs across the board, and also web-based systems, which help with interoperability between the PACS and enterprise.
Very good point about the vendor-neutral everything is going to be in high demand in the future.
RSNA over the last several years has also seemed to metamorphosize a little bit from just being a imaging device show to being maybe 1/3 IT.
Well, yeah, and I think the importance of the image has dictated that, the information and the transfer not only amongst radiologists, but to the referring physicians and even referring physicians to the patients. So you're going to see more of this, the use of handheld devices that are already out there in the consumer's hands and being used for a variety of things, applications based on those consumer devices.
That was a trend I also saw. Stage 2 meaningful use, one of the menu items on there is to get patients more involved in their health care. And there were several vendors on the show floor, including CareStream and several other new vendors I had not seen before, that were offering patient portals so they can access their images and they could access the radiology reports to meet Stage 2 meaningful use.
All right, Charlie.
Well, thank you for joining us, and we're looking forward to seeing what the new year has to bring in 2014. Thank you very much.
Thanks.